Mitch, you're famous for having froze tuition at Purdue for over a decade. Why do you think that was important?
First of all, let's just say Purdue and its board froze tuition. I led cheers for that. It started, I was coming from an experience of the last really 10 years all over this state, staying overnight in way over 100 homes, seeing citizens of a very diverse state becoming more and more concerned and stretched by the cost of higher education. I'll say that it started simply as the idea that we ought to send at least a signal. I had no idea, of course, that we could go even a second year, let alone 12 or 13 as it's soon to be. But it just started as an idea, this is a right thing to do if we can manage it. Over the course of the next 2 or 3 years, however, it began to turn into a smart business decision. It became a brand. You say we're known around the country for it. We are, because other schools, to my surprise, did not moderate their tuition policies very much. And after a few years, we were what every marketer hopes to be, a unique proposition in the marketplace. And I hadn't foreseen that either. But it absolutely began to, in business terms, to create a virtuous cycle in which by surveying our incoming students, we know that our reputation for affordability, their knowledge that they were much less likely to get socked with a surprising increase year on year, was a material factor in attracting students, growing Purdue, and the revenue from that growth made it easier to hold the line.
You know, just as a corollary to that, Purdue students end up with much less debt than others. Can you talk about that a little?
Obviously, this is it's a natural consequence, but something I think all Boilermakers should feel very good about, very proud. You know, Jim, I said so often, I know you have the same feeling, that one of the things I love most about Purdue is that it has always been a place, not for the, by and large, for the children of wealthy families and high status families, but for children from anywhere.
Yeah.
Young people from small towns and inner cities and farms. And we want to always be that kind of place. In keeping with our character, our historic character, has turned into an important positive differentiator for us in the world we're living in. And you know, student debt, I've got asked all the time for my views on that. And I always said, well, as a starting point, you could charge a little less. If you weren't charging so darn much, young people wouldn't have to borrow so much. And
Mitch, what are your thoughts on the student debt forgiveness programs that have been around, knocked around in Washington?
I've been maybe too outspoken in saying I think they're really a bad idea in multiple ways. First of all, it's a misnomer. Debt wouldn't be forgiven, it would be transferred from people who borrowed it to people who didn't, taxpayers in the main. I really couldn't find a redeeming feature in it, Jim. First of all, it's regressive. Any way they've tried to twist it and torture it, it rewards people of higher incomes and higher means far more than those of lesser economic status. It's incredibly unfair. From our university, 99+% of the graduates pay back any student loan they took out. And how incredibly unfair to them to then let subsequent borrowers out of those very same obligations. Fiscally, it's a catastrophe. We're already facing, I'm sad to say, a grim reckoning in a few years from the debt we've already piled up. And here would come several $100 billion more. Worse than that, at the stroke of a president's pen. If you have any respect for the Constitution at all, you know what where the power of the purse is supposed to rest, and it's just a direct violation of that. And fortunately, the courts have seen that and smacked it down. Each way they've tried to, the proponents have tried to devise it. So I think first of all, I think it's a terribly flawed and unfair policy. I think there are far better ways. I've always thought the right way to do this was to put the schools who benefit from these loans and all this subsidy at some risk. And if a student takes the degree out and defaults on their obligation, then the school ought to share in that. And I promise you that if schools were on the hook for even a small percentage of the amount defaulted, they would work a lot harder than they do to keep costs down and to make sure that their graduates, like Purdue graduates, are really ready for a productive life.
Mm-hmm.